I'm in St. Louis with Dr. Steve Hupp, the brand new editor of Skeptical Inquirer magazine, and also
a professor of psychology at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville.
Well, it's so awesome to see you in St. Louis here. I wanted to take the opportunity to ask you some questions, but I want to start with, if you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Oh, wow. Okay, you're starting off strong here. It's good you asked this question. I don't have an answer yet, but the theme of the new issue of Skeptical Inquirer is superheroes. And you didn't know that as you asked the question.
I did not.
I know it. And so I hadn't thought about what this would be. So, my superpower, I'd have eyes on the back of my head.
Why?
You could see people coming.
Do you want to see people coming? Do they sneak up on you a lot?
Well, I think it's because of my office.
Okay.
I face away from the door.
Oh.
And most of us do at my work. And so you get startled when people just appear. So
I think you could just solve that by turning your desk around and maybe getting a better superpower.
I hadn't thought of that. Thank you. The interview can be done. We solved my problem.
You're welcome.
Thanks for having me.
I also have another question from a special guest.
Okay.
How could you possibly be a fan of the Kansas City Chiefs when the mothership is in Buffalo?
Okay, well, there could be many people from the Center for Inquiry that, first and foremost, my boss, Karr, is a big Bills fan, and so we did bets on the Chiefs-Bills game just a couple days ago, and worked out well.
Sorry, Barry, I'm from Iowa. Kansas City is way closer than Buffalo.
Sorry, Barry.
Yeah, sorry. So I want to hear more about your journey into skepticism and Skeptical Inquirer.
My journey into skepticism was really kind of a slow on-ramp. Maybe I'll better place to start is my journey into Skeptical Inquirer, the magazine, which I was starting to get interested in skeptical topics as written by Scott Lilienfeld, who was a psychologist and fellow of the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry.
Do you know him?
Yes. Yeah.
I never got to meet him.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he was fantastic. I actually read his book, 50 Great Myths of Popular Psychology, and I was so excited when I read that book, all 50 myths, and I thought, this is really exciting, and I emailed him out of the blue and said, it's a great book, but it mostly focuses on adults, and I'm a child psychologist, and I shared with him 25 myths in that email that could be a book. And I said, you want to co-author this book with me? And he said, no. But he said they were working on a series, and ultimately that book became part of the Great Myths of Psychology series, Great Myths of Child Development. And so really, Scott Lilienfeld was one of the first psychologists that got me really interested in skeptical psychology. And he was a fellow for the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry. And then I was talking about skepticism at a university event with the chancellor of my university, Von Vandegrift. And he asked if I was a subscriber to the magazine, and I wasn't. And a day or two later in campus mail, he sent me one of his copies of the magazine. And that started subscribing ever since, and that was the beginning of my journey with the magazine. And I'm lucky.
The editor.
And now I'm the editor, and I'm going to get to see you speak tonight. And I brought a bunch of copies of the magazine. I hope that's okay to hopefully give away to your fans. And it looked like a ton of people are signed up, by the way.
Are they?
On Meetup.
Oh.
Like 50 people from what I can gather. So.
Are you trying to make me nervous?
So I'm excited to see you talk.
Actually, it's funny that so I actually co-authored a chapter for a book that you edited with Jonathan Steya.
Yes. Yeah.
And small world then, now you're editor of Skeptical Inquirer, and we were both elected fellows in the same batch.
We're part of the same cohort of fellows, yes. So we were entering this together. He was fantastic. We co-edited a book investigating clinical psychology, and it's his bright idea to invite you.
I learned a lot about energy medicine.
Yeah.
Mostly It's woo.
Yeah, it was a good.
Don't want to give it away.
And you had some good co-authors too.
I had some great co-authors. Yeah, honestly, and they're the ones who did it.
And I got to meet one of them, John Guy, at the conference.
Yeah,
he did fantastic work.
He likes to rub it in my face that I don't have a book yet. Yeah. So Scott Lilienfeld actually influenced me in that I like to use pseudoscience in class to teach science. And it was one of those, I was sort of stumbling on it, and nothing new under the sun, of course. But he, made he really championed the idea of bringing pseudoscience into class. And man, the brilliance of that is just, I don't even know at this point how to teach what good science looks like without showing them what bad science looks like.
Yeah. And he's got a great video you can find on YouTube called Why Pseudoscience Belongs in the Psychology Classroom. And that's a video I showed all my students every year, and I'm sure you've seen that. And it really, the same ideas can be applied to not just the psychology classroom, but in your case, the biology classroom, and really just about every discipline, I think, could benefit from watching that video.
Yeah, you know what? I do more, because I teach about, it's a science class, but I also do information literacy, and I find the same issue. If I'm trying to just teach students in general how to find good information, if they don't know what qualities of bad information is, then they may not be able to tell the difference. Also, I think understanding why they would fall for misinformation to begin with is really fundamental. So I start all my classes with that now. And again, it's such an important step that in classes where I now start with, here's science, and then here's everything we know about science, I feel like I'm missing this giant step, which is, why does it matter that we have this process of science? Why is it, I saw it, so it's true. Or I tried it, so it worked. Why isn't that sufficient?
I agree. I think it's hard to even characterize something as scientific unless we can contrast it against something that's not a claim that's not said in based on a scientific method.
So I'd like to hear more about maybe your plans for Skeptical Inquirer. And I hear maybe your next issue might be something that you want to talk about.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I've got 2 issues under my belt now. We just finished the 3rd issue that'll come out here in about a month or so. And I kind of lucked into this, or I'm just excited about it, that Ken Frazier, who was the editor for 45 years, before he died, wrote a book called The Shadows of Science. And I read that book on the way to PsyCon. And with kind of the idea oh, wow, we've got this new writing from Ken Frazier. We should take an excerpt out of the book and make that the cover story. And so, at first I thought it'd probably just be the first chapter or something. But the first chapter is really an introduction to skepticism and science, the shadows of science. And for the magazine readers, information they would have been exposed to by Ken Frazier for 45 years in some cases. So got really excited about chapter 5 of the book, which is Ken Frazier's origin story. At least that's how I'm spinning it in terms of his connection with the magazine. He was 1976, and he got invited to the meeting where they launched PsyCop, which later became Committee for Skeptical Inquiry, and he reported on the events of that meeting, or the launching of that meeting anyway, at another conference. And so he writes about that, and then he wrote a cover story in Science News magazine for which he was the editor. And the cover story was called Challenging Pseudoscience, had a 4-headed dragon on the cover. And so basically, I'm that's when I got really excited. And so,
I got chilled. I get to legit get chilled.
It's really good. So we've got, we couldn't use all of chapter 5, but we used about 2,000 words from chapter 5. The chapter was called The Subjects of Pseudoscience. But in it, he talks about when he worked at Science News, somebody gave him a list. And the list was called Stories That Should Be Handled with Care.
Oh.
And it was all about ESP, alien abductions.
Why handle with care?
Because it wasn't a list of banned topics. but it was a list of topics that if you're going to cover ESP in your writing in science news, you need to handle that with care and not just flippantly write about it and really know the science or lack of science in a lot of cases behind things. And so that was the idea, handling with care. So that's the title of the cover story is Stories That Should Be Handled with Care, the subjects of pseudoscience. And so that kind of got me thinking about origin stories, and so that's kind of our tie-in to superhero theme of sorts with the magazine. And so we got a beautiful cover that I just can't wait for everybody to see.
Did you meet Ken Frazier?
My interaction with Ken Frazier was all via email when I was submitting my own articles to Skeptical Inquirer. So that's how I've interacted with him, but I never was fortunate to meet him in person.
But you interviewed Ruth Frazier, didn't you?
Yes. So for my first issue of Skeptical Inquirer, I prior to working on it, had reached out to Ruth Frazier and just told her how proud I was to be affiliated with the magazine and how I just wanted to honor Ken Frazier's legacy. And so we got our friendship started on a good start. And then I thought, well, how wonderful would it be if I could just interview her about Ken and his role in the magazine, but I also wanted to learn more about her. And so some of the questions are about Ken and some of the questions are about her. And I think it made for a really nice interview.
Ken Frazier, so I never met him. Mm-hmm. I'm really new to skepticism. Like my first article was published, I think it was January 2022. And how that do you know Guy Harrison?
Yes, he's actually, spoiler alert, has written the cover story for the next issue.
Oh, yay. Okay, so Guy, I've read some of his books and he's a great writer, right? And I was following him on Twitter. I started thinking his power like in 2020, so it was a pandemic project. Hadn't been around very long. But I had created this course to teach for gen ed science. And it was critical thinking, information literacy, and science literacy. And Guy had a cover story in Skeptical Inquirer, and it was about the failing of the American education system. Mm-hmm. And in it, he described what he thought a class would look like that would be what people need. And I was like, well, that actually looks really similar to the course that I had developed. So I had an article about it on my website, and I sent it to Guy, and I said, I agree with you. I think you're onto something. Just wanted to let you know this is what I've done. And he said, stop everything. Here is Ken's email address. Tell him I sent you. Mm-hmm. And next thing you know, that was in the issue. And then that year they published a cover story and then another one. And so 2 years later, they've published 4, literally Skeptical Inquirer has changed my life. And it started with Ken Frazier and Guy Harrison. And I wish I would have had a chance to meet him, obviously. But I did get a chance to express to him by email how much I appreciated the impact that he had had on me. So
yeah, he did so much to amplify voices of well-known skeptics, but he also did a lot to help bring up people like you and me who were just getting our start.
Yeah, 76. I was born that year.
I was born 3 years before that year.
Nuh-uh. Oh, see, I would have thought you're a baby.
But I didn't know you had that connection with Guy Harrison, so excited with his cover story. I know you. I remember the cover story of yours that I remember is the Floating in the Sea of Misinformation with a beautiful cover by Celestia Ward.
Indeed.
Who just did our last cover, which is our Bigfoot is Dead cover.
Indeed.
And she did just an amazing cover with Bigfoot and Bigfoot's toes and a lot of other cryptids.
I love cryptids. They're so fun.
And the big debate was, should we also put aliens on the cover?
Right, because are they a cryptid?
And I wanted aliens at Bigfoot's funeral. And not everyone on the team agreed that aliens belonged at Bigfoot's funeral. So we ended up putting them in the corner, kind of below the barcode.
You didn't just put your editor foot down and be like, you know what?
Well, I'm a new editor, and I do trust my team, so we found a happy medium there on the bottom corner.
So you're nice. Okay.
I've got a really good team who knows what they're doing.
I'm sure you do. That's amazing. I see a game over here, and I have to know, what is this game?
Okay, well, I brought this game, Kreskin's ESP, so if anybody ever sees me on an interview online, this is often in the background. It's the first old board game I bought from a flea market or like an antique mall, and it was when Fair and I were on our honeymoon, and so we like to hit like antique malls. And I saw this. It's from the what do you see?
Springfield, Mass. So have you ever played this on or showed anybody how the game works on an interview, or is it just always in the background?
No, it's just always in the background. Yeah. But it's got special meaning because at SciCon, there was the Penn and Teller interview by Richard Wiseman, in which Penn says he was fully believed in Kreskin as a child, and then later realized Kreskin was deceiving him with his claims of the paranormal abilities. And so Penn completely abandoned magic and science because he was so upset with this game deceiving him into thinking it was scientific. And so we've got a description of that SciCon interview in the next issue and a picture of this game in the next issue. And so that's why this game is on my mind right now.
I kind of feel like you need to play this game with Wiseman too.
Oh, that would be a lot of fun.
I know.
Sure.
Wiseman taught me a card trick. I just said the great Richard Wiseman taught me a card trick, and I still can't pull it off, but I'm working on it.
Okay. Well, now I want to see your card trick. I do have cards as part of the Kreskin's ESP game.
But see, those won't work. They go with this game. So go ahead and show me how the game works.
Okay. Well, there's two parts to this game. It's really just the first part is similar to what's called Zinner cards. And I have to see what you can see on this side here. Okay, so you can see these symbols on the top. And so I've got these cards. There's just the 5. There's a heart. There's an arrow. There's 5 total, but there's multiple of each card. I think 25 total, 5 of each. And so I will look at the top card.
Okay.
And you just have to say which of these 5 top symbols that you think I am seeing. And I will do my best to transmit it.
And if I get it right, that proves I'm psychic.
Well, we'll have to do a few. You do have a 1 in 5 chance. So let's maybe do 5.
Okay, fair.
Okay.
I'm going to say a heart.
First one was a check. All right. So I keep this one.
Okay.
Next one. I got to look. Okay.
So the gambler's fallacy. I'm going to go back with heart. All right. I'm going to eventually be right. Gosh darn it.
Okay. You're 0 for 2, but there's still hope here.
See, now I got to go with heart again. Is it heart this time?
Oh, should have gone with check.
Darn it.
Okay. There's still hope. You can still be 2 for 5, which would be beating chance.
The arrow.
Oh,
Is it a heart?
Actually, I wasn't transmitting yet.
Oh,
I forgot
okay.
I think we should.
Oh, that was the problem.
The...
It's the transmitter. Okay. You're the problem.
Now, maybe. It does take both of us. Now I'm transmitting.
I'm going to do the arrow. Is it a heart? If it's a heart, I'm going to throw things. Okay, good.
Now, this is your chance to at least get even with chance. This is the 5th one I am transmitting.
It's the heart.
It is the heart. I didn't do it on purpose. It really was the heart. So you can get 1 out of 5. So, based on this limited test and this limited data, you do not yet have ESP.
I still think it's the transmitter.
It probably. And just to bring the game full circle, we don't have to do this one, but there is the other way to play, which is this device. Your husband's in the room, so this is good. Here, you can ask any question you want about love.
Okay. Ooh, it's loaded because he's literally right behind me.
Should ask if your soulmate is in the room.
Ooh. Is my soulmate in this room?
We just have to. That's a yes.
Okay.
I'm gonna say that was a yes.
Okay, but that still doesn't mean that it's him, does it?
You keep bombing on the soulmate issue. First at the conference, you failed to declare.
I know I did.
On
It
the
made me look
day.
bad.
And then on the second day, you
I didn't get credit for it then.
And they're releasing those videos now, so we'll get a watch.
So it's going to be on camera. Proof. Oh, that game is crazy fun.
Yeah, so that's that game. But this works under what's called the ideomotor effect, which is how Ouija boards and facilitated communication as a form of communication with children with autism also work. So these are important concepts, not just all fun and games.
And dowsing.
Yes, and dowsing. Yeah. And we, with your husband, Anthony, were in a workshop at SciCon. Oh, no, Anthony gave me his ticket. I'm remembering now. You weren't there, Anthony.
I was with you.
Yes, and they did a dowsing demonstration, also working under the ideomotor effect, with the 2 dowsing rods, and somebody had to walk over like 5 upside-down cups to see if there was a water bottle under one with the dowsing rod, and they failed.
Do you know, I recently was driving through my town and saw a town fire department truck parked by somebody's yard. Nobody else was around, so they were in the front yard, though, dowsing for water. The fireman.
The fireman?
Yes.
Was dowsing for water because they didn't have access to other water.
You know, I was like, maybe, this is awkward. I'll keep going. And then I'm like voice texting Kenny, going, Kenny, you're not going to believe what I just saw. He goes, go back and talk to him. Oh, it's going to be so awkward. I do it. Yeah, I know you do it.
Well, the tricky thing, from what I understand, and from this workshop we were in, is the tricky thing about dowsing for water is that if you dig deep enough, you almost always find water.
This was in somebody's front yard, and there were clearly water pipes. And what bothers me a little bit is that the fire department should have better strategies, obviously, for finding where water is. But even worse, though, I'm going to say worse. Like, we all have pseudosciences that we can fall for, right? And areas of science that we deny when we don't want to accept conclusions. But it's just fascinating because I make these assumptions like, well, everybody knows that that's right. And so I posted it on my Facebook, and one of my friends says, but dowsing is real. You know what? That was a really good reminder for me to remember that people do believe these things, and to make sure I approach them with some level of empathy and not make assumptions. So
yeah, and I'm sure over your life you've believed some things, and I certainly have too. And as one of my favorite parts about working on the first book was there were certain things I went into it not knowing if it was a myth or if there was science behind it. And that's really the most fun, is to really do a true investigation where you're open-minded and you're just going to follow the evidence. And for me, in some cases, it was like, that's a win-win, because if it's a myth, then it can be one of my 50 myths. If it's a truth, then it's kind of a surprising truth. And then we had like a little section on the end for like surprising truths. And so...
biggest surprises here then? What were your biggest surprises? Like the things that you thought were myths that weren't, or the things that you thought were true but were myths?
Well, the first two that come to mind, so I my whole life believed that if you were struggling with fertility and then you kind of gave up and stopped trying to get pregnant and then you adopted a child, then suddenly that would make you more likely to get pregnant, or for your partner to get pregnant. I just always heard that, saw it on TV, always believed it. And so I was like, I don't know, I got to go look at the research. And so clearly the research shows that's not the case. Another one on the flip side was this idea that a woman could be pregnant and then like a few weeks later get pregnant a second time while she's already pregnant.
I have a friend who that happened to.
That blew my mind.
Yeah.
When I learned that.
Doesn't happen very often.
Right.
But yes.
Yeah.
And surprising when it would happen.
Yeah, very surprising. I thought I was fascinated about it. Yeah.
In class, and I'm curious to know what you think about this approach, because the class isn't about pseudoscience, but it includes pseudoscience. And so I call it the critical thinking training wheels, where I start with beliefs that aren't triggering. So I don't even start with the full moon effect, right? I'll start with personality assessments or witches or ghosts, UFOs, that kind of thing. I mean, I don't start with vaccines or climate change or evolution or something. So I teach them those skills on things that aren't as meaningful to them, and they get to learn what that feels like and learn the process and the skills, and hopefully, we can graduate to something that's a bit more difficult.
Yeah. I think that's a great approach. And it's not the approach I've necessarily taken, but I might have to move to that approach, which is start, teach in order of like the least threatening myths and finish with the more threatening myths. I think it's brilliant, actually.
Okay. Well, part of it was just me being a coward because I didn't want to go in like day one going, okay, climate change, let's talk about that, you know?
No, it makes it easier. For your book that you're working on, that could rank order them. I actually have, for my myths, I've had polled students and parents on their beliefs of the different myths, so I know which ones are like the most strongly believed and which ones are less. So I could do it in that order. I just haven't.
When you say strongly, is there a correlation, you suppose, between strongly believing and more resistant to let them go? Or is it just like, I think this is true, but I wouldn't really care, so I can't? Well,
I guess I misspoke. I haven't measured like strength of belief, but I'm like what percentage of parents believe something versus not is how I have it. But I actually, that would be a great follow-up question for each one, would be not just do you believe it, but how strongly do you believe it? That could be useful, I think.
Back to that session that we attended at PsyCon, it was great. It was Kenny Biddle and Jim Underdown.
Mm-hmm.
And I've actually been talking with Jim because I'm fascinated by this idea that they've got it's the psychic test, the test.
It's the Center for Inquiry Investigations group.
So if you think you have a supernatural ability, then they will give you the controlled conditions where you can test that. And if you can actually demonstrate it, wasn't like $500,000?
It is bumped up to $500,000. And someone tried it at the conference we were at.
They did. They thought they wanted to move clouds. They thought they could move clouds.
Yeah. So they set up a condition in which you can move a cloud from here to here, $500,000.
And no one has won it yet.
No one has won it yet.
I don't know about you, but I wouldn't be trying to win that. So what I was really fascinated by was when they said what percentage of people tried to trick them, like that actually tried to deceive them.
Yes, that is surprising.
And we all thought, at least I thought it was going to be really high.
Yeah.
But he said 0.
Yeah.
They all believe it.
Yeah.
And so there's not only that aspect, but the like following up with them over time, did their minds change? Like, it's really difficult to, if I think I can move clouds and I've staked my reputation on it and I go to a group and I look, I can do it and I want to win this big prize and whatever, and I can't, I can see how immediately that would be pretty threatening and I might even be a little defensive. But is a seed planted? And does that go into something?
Yeah.
Because changing minds is really challenging. So do people change?
Yeah, and my impression is a lot of people who, after they fail the test, they start generating excuses for why it didn't work that day. But I believe maybe a small percent, it does start to chip away at their belief.
I think Jim and I have talked about following up with some of them and seeing, because I'm just curious.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes Jim writes about the attempts in Skeptical Inquirer magazine, so it's a good reason to subscribe. In fact, the issue I'll be giving out at your talk tonight has an article by Jim with 3 of the attempts.
Ooh, yeah. Interesting. Awesome. Well, it's so great to see you, and thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. Is there anything else you want to say before we end?
Thanks for having me. I'm a big fan of your work. Please, yes, keep submitting things to the magazine. I love to have you in there. And since I've talked about the magazine, I should just thank Ben Rafford, Julia Lavarnway, Nicole Scott, Alex Nikasi have all been just amazing team to help get the magazine out. Barry Karr, Robyn Blumner, the CEO of CFI, mm-hmm. And I guess Stuart Vyse, too. I always like to thank him because he was the interim editor between Ken and me. And he helped me get the job, I think.
That was a stellar group of people you just thanked. Yeah. So I'm going to just say you all are awesome. So yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, too.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing. And if you do not subscribe to Skeptical Inquirer, here's my recommendation. Do it now.
It's a good idea.